Welcome to Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021. Your day weather podcast is being brought to you by Chugwater Chili, the gourmet spice of Western life. You're going to want to go to chugwaterchili.com and get some great holiday discounts here through the month of November. Remember, this is the year to get your Christmas gifts early, and Chugwater Chili makes for great gifts this upcoming holiday season. Free shipping right now on orders over $50. So go to chugwaterchili.com. Well, after some colder, chilly eating weather here lately, we're going to have some clearing skies. A trend towards drier conditions will continue through the weekend and into Monday of next week. It'll be pretty good, really, considering the time of year. We are going to have some windy periods, though. It's just that time of year, folks. You just can't avoid the wind. It happens, and this is the time of year where the winds pick up, but they're nothing. Those winds aren't going to be anything we're not used to. The next big change comes towards the middle of next week. There's some pretty large disagreements in the long-range modeling, and that's going to come into play. So the forecast is going to be variable. We could see a pretty good shot of colder, wet weather in some parts of the western United States mid to late next week. It could just be a brief front. So we'll go through the disagreements, and that'll be something that should come into better focus in the coming days. We're going to kind of review October real briefly across the nation with precipitation and temperatures. Today's satellite photo shows a lot of low clouds. That's the blue here. Low clouds and fog, and low clouds hanging over the mountain peaks is what you're seeing there. Here's the next several systems coming off the Pacific Northwest coast. The Pacific Northwest coast is just going to continue to be under assault by rain and stormy weather here in the coming days with those strong jet stream winds. But you can see clear skies over California and the Great Basin kind of building on in with the high pressure, and that's what's going to be settling into here for the next few days. You can see that. Here's the high pressure ridge beginning to build on in. Here's the trough in the Great Lakes hanging back that brought us the colder weather, and that's that low you see on the satellite imagery. And then there's that pocket of very cold air up in the Aleutians along the north slope of Alaska with those cold sea surface temperatures up there. Going forward, this is the next little wave that comes through. This is Thursday night into Friday. Basically, it's a piece of that California storm that'll go through the Pacific Northwest, through Idaho, Montana. It's going to clip northern Wyoming and head into the Dakotas. But as it heads east, it's kind of going to peter out. So it's not going to produce too much rain, snow up here, a little bit, but it will make for windy conditions along and near the Continental Divide during the day Friday. So Friday is a day of wind. But over the weekend, we have high pressure over Old Mexico here and a broad area of westerly mild air getting pushed in from the central California coast into the Rockies and High Plains. So this is going to mean a pretty good looking weekend coming on up. Really nothing too bad other than some breezy areas. The Pacific Northwest, though, under the assault of a strong, cold, moist jet stream wind hitting the coast. And as those strong jet stream winds bringing moisture go up and over the Cascades and over the higher terrain here, you're going to get rain and snow breaking on out. But it will stay up there through the weekend. And you can see that. This is through Saturday. Look at all that rain just pouring in to the Pacific Northwest coast into central California. But some bleed over, gets into Idaho, western Montana, up into Yellowstone Park. And there's going to be some showers getting east of the divide here, but you can just see not much. Certainly a drier trend has really developed here, and that's going to continue here for a little bit longer. As we go forward, this is for Tuesday of next week, the 9th of November. We have a big pocket of cold air just off the coast of British Columbia. We have a packing of very big differences in air pressure right here across the North Pacific, driving some really strong jet stream winds across the area. Again, as we showed you, those sea surface temperatures are really cold here, but they're warm here, and that contrast really helping to cause those strong and moist jet stream winds to develop. The question will be is how much of this storm is going to survive battering the west coast by the time it gets into the high plains and Rockies. The jet stream winds by early next week, really, really strong again. We saw this in October, so that's going to bring another very heavy round of precipitation to Washington, Oregon, parts of California, and then some of that moisture gets thrown into the northern Rockies and the northern plains by the middle part of next week. But as we saw in October, when you get strong jet stream winds like this across the Pacific, it does make a bit of a problem for the modeling. When things are moving along really quick, the computer models have difficulty with that. And as we go forward, into the middle of next week. This is by next Thursday, the European model. So there's a strong, cold winter storm over the northern plains. Now, this is just one solution. Another solution is that the system just whips across the northern tier of the United States and does not become this nicely formed storm. But if this nicely formed storm does develop, cold northwest winds will mean good snow for the mountains of the Intermountain West towards the middle of next week, while a cold, windy pattern will hit the front range of Wyoming and Colorado and Montana, while the northern plains of North Dakota, South Dakota here could end up with a pretty good snow event. But again, big question mark. Due to the fast-moving jet stream winds here, you just have to take the computer models with a really big grain of salt. It's just a scenario that they don't handle well. But what we do know is a pocket of cold, moist air right here is going to get ejected from the Gulf of Alaska and driven into the United States. So it's going to be a weather maker. It's just going to be whether or not it's going to be a big weather maker or not. If you were to look at temperatures, if that pattern I just showed you pans out, we have colder than average temperatures that will go from Alaska all the way deep into western North America on the backside of this storm. Whoa, Greenland really, that means Greenland 20 to 30 degrees below normal for Greenland. Okay, so that's cold. So some cold air building up in those higher latitudes. But that cold air would come in on the backside, and this is what the precipitation could look like. Pretty impressive if that does develop. Again, will it develop? I don't know, but the northern plains will need to kind of keep an eye on the system, and you can see the moisture over the mountains of Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, Idaho, back into the Pacific Northwest. That's a good pattern for the mountains to get snowed on. Cold northwest winds aloft. This is what the snow looks like if that pattern develops. So we've got to watch this area here as a potential winter storm. But if the storm dips more south, that could get pulled more south. If it stays more on a state line, it's not going to be much of a system. So stay tuned. I want to review October really quickly. It was a great month, as we have mentioned in earlier podcasts, for precipitation in the western United States. All of these blue areas represent above average precipitation for the month of October. And in this area right here was a great stretch of moisture for October, really more than expected. And as we showed you in last week's drought monitor, there were subtle improvements. So this axis of precipitation, great to see in October, and I think this same area right here in the month of November could be in a similar situation, especially right here as we are looking at those strong jet stream winds continuing. Temperature-wise, the precipitation kind of reflects that. Actually, the coolest part of the United States and North America relative to normal in October was the West Coast. Cooler than average temperatures were centered really on California. Now, as you got to the Continental Divide, the white means average, and then the yellow and the orange colors mean above average. So along and near the divide and east of the divide is where October was warm. Along and west of the divide is where October was a bit colder than average. Have yourself a good Wednesday. We'll talk to you tomorrow.